All right, and we're live. Welcome to another edition of Swamp Creatures Podcast. How's everybody doing tonight?
We're doing great, except for your fucking robot aids already. You start right off, man.
Really? Already?
I'm hearing them just fine, Duke. I think.
Oh, then maybe it's just me. It's just me. It doesn't like him.
Yeah.
Sounds like
you
a
and
new problem,
your
Mike.
Walmart connection. Yep. All right.
Yep.
So we want to welcome back to the swamp tonight, Mike Maat.
Good to be with you all. I can hear you just fine.
Awesome. Excellent. So before we get in with Mike, we want to do the go around, get our drinks in. So Mitch, you go first because I already know you got the bullshit again.
Yeah, I got the Moscow Mule again, mainly because this week I completely forgot and then got home and realized I don't know what else I have aside from making the same thing that I already have. So, yeah.
I mean, why
nothing fun
a
this
good
week.
thing,
It's
yeah?
the same
Don't
thing.
ruin a good thing.
Reliable. All right.
Yes.
Duke, what do you got?
I am drinking some Coronas this evening. Yeah, something nice and simple.
Usual. I'm back to the Yingling again. We ran through the Blue Moon, and then Mike, you got your.
I am sporting a 1969 Slurpee cup from 7-Eleven.
Nice. Well, what's in that Slurpee cup?
My doctor said I'm supposed to drink a mixture of tonic water and Gatorade after my workouts. And I said, are you mandating that? Because I don't go for mandates. He said, do whatever you want. I said, give it to me.
All right. Sounds pretty delicious.
That usually sounds like my hangover cure. Smart, though. Revitalizes the heart and the body.
Yeah.
So, Mike.
Well, what are you drinking? Oh, yeah, you're drinking a Yingling. My bad. Yeah. Dude, I'm a few beers in already. Sorry.
You haven't even started.
So, Mike, you're back in the swamp. Last time we saw you, you were running for Congress. So, tell us more about how that went. What are you doing now? And for those at home, who you are to begin with anyway.
Well, I don't know what order you want to go in. I'll take that in reverse or inside-out order. At the moment, we're spreading the word that I am going to be seeking in a robust campaign the nomination of the Libertarian Party for president in 2024, starting now. I am guessing and hopeful that this is the first your audience has heard of it, and I'm very honored to be able to make the announcement on the Swamp Creatures. Number two, you made some reference to back in the swamp. I'm not exactly sure that you may be giving me too much credit, assuming I left the swamp. I've always been in one swamp or another. Last time I was with you all, I was representing the Libertarian Party in a special congressional race in Florida's District 20. It went well, depending on your definition of well. Nobody expected us to get a large proportion of votes, but we did a great job, our team, of spreading the word. 1 million points of contact, including cards and letters and handing things out in the parking lots and social media, in the millions if you include all the online podcasts and stuff like that. Tremendous amount of hard work, of course, but in my view, completely worth it. A big bang for the buck in Broward County in terms of getting the word out to a lot of people who never heard of libertarianism, never heard of Libertarian Party. Did we sway a lot of voters? No. But I do believe that the good fight consists of taking it step by step. And the first step is telling people that there is an alternative to the political duopoly and the authoritarianism that they represent. So it was a great fight. It was a great 6 months. So, that's what was going on the last time I was in your particular swamp.
So you were running for Congress, and you, like you were saying, you felt like you had a pretty successful campaign. So what were some of the things you learned coming out of that run? Like, I was out there with you. We were in Walmart parking lots, talking with people, handing out cards, getting petition
Yeah.
signs. So, talk to me more about like some of the things you learned as a candidate coming out of that.
A couple of things come to mind right away. One is that the ideas that we represent, libertarianism, is a hell of a lot more popular than the Libertarian Party, right? I do believe that a lot of people out there in America in general are libertarians, lowercase l, at heart. They don't know they're libertarians, but folks out there who believe in limited government, on believe in the Constitution representing a good vehicle to protect our rights, who are upset that our government has drifted so far away from constitutional democracy. People who believe in capitalism and making decisions for yourself. People who believe in living their lives to their own personal standards and not up to some standard imposed or set by the government or by anybody else. I think that that's a good representation of the American spirit, to be honest. And a lot of people are libertarian without realizing it. Having said that, the value of the brand of the Libertarian Party is a lot less than what I had anticipated. If it was heartening to hear the extent to which people were libertarian at heart, it was disheartening to hear that the value of the Libertarian brand is not only small, but it was impressed upon me explicitly by any number of people that the value of the brand of the Libertarian Party is negative in the minds of so many people. You'd be better off telling people that you were independent than telling people you were a libertarian. There's just a bit of a backlash in some quarters, particularly in Broward County, I believe, which is a heavily blue district, of course, against the Libertarian Party. I think that that represents a lot of misinformation. People don't realize that we're the party that represents all those good ideas that they do actually believe in. I think that we need to do a much better job of reaching out to people, not only to push these good ideas, but to touch people in the context of their particular concerns, and to show them that our ideas can put into action, make their lives better.
Let's hope we're only touching people that have consented to being touched first. We don't want any blowback there.
So, all right, I want to jump in here real quick.
No, go ahead.
All right, so we're going to start off right away. I know Mitch is very much a supporter of the Dave Smith campaign for the presidential nomination, and I am someone who definitely likes the idea that it's representing. And something that you just said is a big reason behind why they're choosing to run him in the first place, and that is the brand of the Libertarian Party. You said the brand of the Libertarian Party is basically garbage. People don't know what it is, or if they know what it is, it's a laughing stock. But the whole idea of the mainstream potential and the mainstream reach in this coming cycle of Dave Smith is the whole reason why he's running, to rebrand in a way. Like, we have the Reno reset to help rebrand the LNC and the National Party, and then to get Dave Smith as the nominee down the road, another step to help rebrand and to help change the outlook and the just the whole attitude towards the Libertarian Party.
That's right.
If that is the goal of that, what is your goal and reasoning for running against that? If you already see that the party itself is a joke, and that is the goal of this coming
That is the goal,
years.
and that is the goal of this particular campaign. I believe that this is the unique, singular campaign that will have the ability to combine a couple of different things. One is bold messaging of an organic nature that comes out of the party itself. This is not going to be a campaign that outsources our leadership to some bygone Democrat or Republican, right? And the other thing that we're going to combine with that is a very credible set of solutions that fits with our candidate's particular background. No other candidate is going to have a background in public policy, in terms of a history of public service, like mine. And that matters. And the reason that that matters is because it makes your solutions a lot more credible and a lot more thoughtful. It also makes them a lot more acceptable to people who expect a certain background in their candidate. Remember that a big goal of the campaign is to reach outside of this party. When you reach outside of the Libertarian Party, what you find is people, and as a party, we have learned this the hard way over and over again, is that people react in a certain way when they perceive a candidate to be potentially, even if it's a stretch, potentially someone that they could see in the White House. If they don't believe that you have the background and the stock to theoretically, potentially, like I said, maybe it's a stretch, but they've got to be able to close their eyes and at least imagine that person as taking the reins of the federal government. And if they don't perceive that, it doesn't really matter how good your linguistics are. They're not giving you the time of day. We have learned that the hard way in the past, which is why we've chosen, in my view, a mistake, but at least I understand why it was done, why we have chosen in the past to sometimes run candidates who are politicians from outside the party, right? Or recently outside the party.
Well, I mean, let me interrupt you real quick there, Mike. Isn't that like your argument that you're making is an argument towards electability? And isn't that the argument that was made to run people like Gary Johnson and Bill Weld?
That's exactly right. That's why it was done.
Yeah, but your argument is. Go ahead, Josh. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, let me.
The reason it failed is because it wasn't organically, it wasn't interesting, it wasn't boldly libertarian.
Well, okay. let me kind of rephrase Duke's question, because I think I understand where he's coming from, but you know, we're looking to rebrand the LP with, you know, the general voting population. Now, in Dave Smith's case, he's getting on Kennedy, he's getting on Joe Rogan, he's got a big following on social media, so he has a large reach. Now, I don't know about you, Mike, but I want to know, I think what Duke's trying to say is, how are you going to have that kind of reach that Dave Smith has when he's able to get on a Joe Rogan that's going to get 100 million listeners in a week span, who's going to get on Kennedy and there's going to be a couple 100,000, a couple million people sitting there watching her on cable TV with him on there, who, you know, how are you going to overcome that type of gap?
A couple of thoughts to keep in mind. Remember, that's not the goal, right? The goal is to go far, far, far beyond that. If our goal is to get on the Kennedy show, I'm sorry, that's not an objective that makes sense for this party. Mm-hmm. We need to become real players in the American political process. To do that requires bold, credible leadership at the top, not grassroots. Remember, there's no such thing as a grassroots movement that has turned into a successful political party in the United States. You need leadership at the top. And that means participating in the presidential election. That means participating in the presidential debates. That means getting, in the past, it's been 15%, as you all know. That's been thrown up in the air a little bit right now. We don't know what the rules are going to be in 2024. But if we can't get into the debates, there's no point in participating. I don't care how many times you're on Joe Rogan. It just frankly doesn't matter. You have to get on that stage, which means you've got to get to whatever that goal is going to be. We don't know whether it's 5%, 10%, 15%, or 20%, but you've got to reach a certain proportion of the population with a message that's not only bold and unique and separated from the Democratic and Republican parties, but you've got to do so in a way that is so credible they could imagine you taking over the White House, because you have to reach millions of people with a credible set of messages. That means that.
if I might real quickly, that's why people see like going on Rogan as such a big deal, because he has a very large reach, that which seems to go beyond all the corporate media. Like that.
It is a good thing.
So
It
we
is a
agree
good
with that.
thing.
But
What's that?
like I agree with you there, but I do see a value in getting onto some of those other platforms to reach people.
It is
Yeah,
a good thing. My point is that you have to go way beyond that.
Well, yes, I agree. You have to
this
go
is
way
not a
beyond
race
that.
to the 8-yard line.
Well,
This
no,
is
it
not a
isn't.
race to the 35-yard line. This is not a race to the 50. This is not a race to the other team's 40.
Mike, what was the percentage that Joe Jorgensen got of the vote?
Something like 1.5.
Okay. Now, if we're going to need to get to 15% or something like that, how are we first going to do that without having the reach of being able to get on mainstream platforms and mainstream credibility? If you're not able to build that up, I mean, you have to first be able to get to that reach. You have to get to that reach and to change the perception of the party before you can get to that 15%. It's more than just having someone on top that has like some credibility or electability behind them. If it was just about having some electability behind you, there's every single candidate could have been would have been a preferable candidate beforehand, and we know how all those candidates turned out.
Right. Well, our previous candidate had neither.
Right. Well, every candidate has been a joke. That's why the party is considered a joke. So the whole idea is to make the party not a joke anymore, and you need people that are able to reach millions and millions and millions of people and relate to them on many different ways before they can change that. It's more than just getting on a debate stage on CBS or something like that.
It has to lead up to getting on the debate stage on CBS.
But yes, you have, like you said, you have to. We're not stopping at the 8-yard line, but you got to cross the 8 line before you can get to the 50, or to the goal line. You got to get to that first step first.
That's right. That's right. So even Joe, go ahead. I'll wait for you. I can answer your question if you want.
No, I'm waiting.
Okay. Even Joe Jorgensen raised $8 million, right? It was incorrectly spent, and it was the incorrect candidate. $8 million is quite a powerful amount of money for someone who is not a credible candidate. Let's be perfectly honest about that. It needs to be spent on purchased media in order to build a profile that'll allow you to get toward earned media. It's a 2-step process. It's a chicken and egg. It has to go back and forth. That has to be accomplished. That cannot be accomplished without a credible candidate. It can't. The reason that we got a whopping 3.5% with the governor before that is because people perceived him to be a credible candidate, and he was able to earn free media in a much bigger way than Joe was, and in a much bigger way than candidates prior to him. So yes, it has been proven, you're absolutely right, we all agree, it has been proven that you must have a credible candidate. At the same time, we also know that we have to have bold and uniquely bold messaging. It doesn't work to go out there and be bland. It doesn't work to go out and play off of the other parties. We have an opportunity, because of the authoritarianism being pushed by the other parties, because of the silliness, the unpopularity, variations of fraud, for whatever your favorite complaint of the week is, we have a huge opportunity. But that opportunity is not just an opportunity for the Libertarian Party. It's an obligation for the party and an opportunity for the nation. This is a call of duty for us. We need to change things, and that means putting up a much more credible campaign than we have in the past, with much more bold messaging. You can't just do one or the other. The lessons that we have learned are not give up on credibility and go with bold, nor is it give up on bold and go with credibility. You have to do both. That means you have to put up someone willing to tell the truth and differentiate from the other parties. And at the same time, someone who has the background that can convince people that it's a very plausible solution.
All right. So you were talking about credibility here, and that, we keep touching back on Gary Johnson and his run for president, and that, he had a certain amount of credibility. Now, it's not just Dave Smith who's probably going to be seeking the presidential nomination for the LP. There's going to be other people. You're going to have guys like, more than likely, Spike Cohen. You're going to more than likely have guys like Justin Amish mixed in with people like the usual suspects, Joe Jorgensen, Dan Berman, Vermin Supreme. So, we beat up on you about Dave, and we'll come back to beating up on you about Dave in a little bit. But what I want to hear is, you're talking about credibility, and you got someone like Justin Amish who spent a couple years, in the Capitol as a congressman. You have someone like Spike who toured around the country and, online and in person, he speaks and has bold ideas, and he has bold solutions and all of that. So how are you going to separate your bold ideas and your bold solutions and your credibility from guys like Spike and Justin and Berman?
Those are three very different people, so maybe we should take them in in different groups.
I mean,
two of the three. Justin, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, like Meatloaf said.
That is what he said.
A heartbreaking song, though.
I would argue he was wrong about that, but okay. And that's from good for you for making a reference from my era more than your own. Let's talk about Justin Amash if you want to, because he's the one who's very different from Dave Smith. He is the one person in our party who has worked in Washington besides me that I know of. Am I right about that?
I don't know. There's probably a few.
There's probably a few I'd had to.
Yeah, there'll probably. Yeah, probably by the time we get to 2024
Name one.
in DC.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about Justin as being his own group. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he has credibility because he has worked in Washington. He has been a congressman, but let's be honest with each other. The reason we're talking about Justin Amash is because he's well known. The reason he's well known is because he was a congressman. The reason he was a congressman is because he was a Republican.
He's only well known because he was the guy that went against Trump, not because he was a congressman.
I knew.
No, I just hate that wholeheartedly. His profile got larger when he went against Trump, and then what did he do about that?
He bailed.
He just kept going with his business. Yeah,
he quit,
and he quit.
He quit. Okay,
but it's the only reason he has any pull as a presidential candidate, because it's the only reason that a great number of people know who he is.
It's because he was the anti-Trump GOP guy.
Yes,
that's not the only reason he has some pull. He would have some pull if he were just a congressman.
90%. What the 90% of the people that know him is because he went against Trump. 90% of the people that know his name.
90% of the people inside the Libertarian Party knew of his name because he went against Trump.
In the Republican Party,
because I would argue there were a lot of people from like the Young Americans for Liberty crowd area that knew of Justin Amash far before any of this.
That's exactly right, and a lot of people in the Republican Party. But be that as it may, the reason he's well known and has pull has nothing to do with the Libertarian Party, and has relatively little to do with his libertarianism. What we know of him is that he got run out by the president. Happens to a lot of people. He was threatened with getting primaried, wanted no taste of that. His personal decision, that's fine. But if he were to represent this party, it would smack of exactly what we have done in the past, which is adopt a posture of effectively outsourcing our leadership to someone who came into our party having become noteworthy already. That's exactly what it would look like. That's exactly what it would feel like. I'm not saying it's impossible for that strategy to work. I'm just saying I don't think it would work, and I think it would undermine our long-term interests. No party succeeds by looking like it has no choice but to outsource its leadership. That's just not a winning branding strategy in the long run.
Agreed.
That's the problem with that. And don't get me wrong. I think Justin Amash is a hell of a nice young man. He's, I think he's basically a libertarian. Obviously, we all know he's taken some positions in the past that, we weren't too happy about. But
I know for sure he's read economics in one lesson. Sorry, a little inside joke, Mike.
Okay, that's terrific. And he has background in Washington. I'm the only candidate who spent as many years in Washington as I did. I'm the only candidate that has already been in the White House and worked for the White House. I'm the only candidate who's worked on monetary and fiscal policy as a professional matter. I'm the only candidate who has professional experience in criminal justice. I'm the only candidate who is taught at the university level. Now, I'm not saying that those are the things that are necessarily prerequisites for credibility. I'm just saying that those are things that contribute to it, and the other candidates don't have it. And I don't say that with pleasure. I wish that we had a dozen candidates that did. But the truth of the matter, whether I like it, you like it, or anyone else likes it, is that we don't.
All right. Now, I saw you dodge this there, and it's very politician of you, Mike. So I like that. First off, I see you're practicing.
And maybe it was a mistake. Give me another shot.
No, it wasn't a mistake. You danced around the Spike Cohen question. You never addressed Spike. So I'm going to ask it blatantly out there so that way I can go run and grab a beer as you explain it. You talk about credibility, and I agree with you. A huge part of any election is credibility. You have to be a credible candidate in order to win. But the other part of it is likability. People need to like you in order to vote for you. That's why Donald Trump lost his election in 2020. He wasn't the most likable candidate. Was he credible? That's up for debate, but he wasn't likable. A lot of people can't argue that. So
he was apparently likable enough to become president of the United States. It's hard to argue that Donald J. Trump was an unsuccessful politician.
It's hard to argue when you run against Hillary Clinton. You have you set the bar outstandingly low.
And he did beat 15 other candidates in the Republican Party that a lot of people viewed as credible. So as much as I dislike the guy, you got to hand it to him on some level. But that has very little to do with Spike. So keep going.
As a former GOP member, I will say, once again, I reiterate my point of they set the bar incredibly low.
Yeah.
Digressing, though. So, Spike.
Yep.
Hugely likable. Loved amongst the Libertarian Party. Another one again. Huge reach. He's out there in the media already. He's already positioning himself in that type of way where he's out there giving bold messages, bold statements. He's in everybody's comments. He's all over social media. Yep. And once again, he's likable. Everybody wants Spike there. You go all over the country. Everybody loves having Spike. They love having Tasha. They love having.
Yeah, they love having Tasha there. That's what it is, really.
Yeah, I mean, they really.
They don't want Spike there. It's all Tasha.
We all love Tasha, but it's not only Tasha.
Yeah.
Listen, Tasha Cohen's husband is running. We need to get back to him.
Yeah, right. Okay. Oh, you're right.
So Tasha's husband potentially running for president. Now we're going to have delegates inside the Libertarian Party who are going to make the decision first on who's going to be president. Whether it's Dave, whether it's Justin, whether it's Spike. So there has to be a certain amount of likability. The delegates have to like you when we get to DC in 2024 if you have any hope. So how do you plan to overcome, the likability factor with people like Dave Smith? He's a comedian. He's out there telling jokes. He's in front of thousands of people all the time. You got Spike Cohen, who's out there constantly working crowds and doing speaking engagements, and he's always in libertarian circles, having these conversations. So what's going to get you past guys like Spike and Dave with that likability factor?
Two thoughts or three. Number one, let me get this out of the way in case anyone should be confused. I wouldn't let someone else say anything bad about Spike Cohen, and I'm not going to do it myself. So if anyone here feels like taking a shot at him, you're going to have to meet me in the hallway in Reno in a few weeks, because I ain't putting up with it. Number two, and I don't say that because he's likable. I say that because I think that he is the real deal. I would rather vote for a guy that I thought was less likable, but who could get the job done. And I think that Spike Cohen is the kind of guy who's dedicated to libertarianism and dedicated to the party in a way that impresses me profoundly and impresses me fundamentally. And the fact that I actually like him on a personal level, that doesn't mean shit, to be honest. Having that out of the way, I think that likability is a threshold issue. And by that, I mean the difference between 90% likability and 70% likability is not very important. You have to be sufficiently likable that people don't think you're a complete jerk. This is why, to your point, Josh, you brought it up earlier, and I think you're absolutely on point, to look at what happened in 2016. We had two people that were relatively unlikable representing the duopoly, but for whatever reason, maybe we should talk about what those reasons are, they managed to defeat people who are more likable, who are ably vying for their respective parties' nominations. They were likable enough. Now, I'm not suggesting that, vote for Mike. He's likable enough.
That's a hell of a slogan, Mike. I mean, you put that on a billboard or put it on a bumper sticker. Vote right? Mike Maat. He's likable enough.
Well, my point is, it is a threshold issue. You don't have to overcome Spike. You don't have to overcome Justin Amash. What you have to do is demonstrate to people that you have what it takes to carry the party's message forward. Yes, if you're a jerk and people just don't naturally like you or naturally dislike you, that's going to put up a serious roadblock in your efforts to be successful. It's not going to work. But if you don't have the right messaging and the right background to establish credibility, the difference between 90% likability and 70% likability is completely irrelevant. So, to your point, my campaign's biggest deficit is in terms of name recognition. I have lots of other assets, right? I got a good team. I got money in the bank. I got a good story. I got right messaging and plan and background. But my biggest deficit, my biggest hurdle to overcome is in terms of name recognition. That's why we're starting so early. There is no substitute for hard work and time when it comes to overcoming that deficit. And I'm not here to make everyone, fall in love with me. Indeed, part of the message that we need to get out is that this is a time when not only does the Libertarian Party have an opportunity, but truly we have a call of duty. We need to start doing things differently. And that means, are we pissed off enough to do things differently? Are we sufficiently uncomfortable with our position in the world that we are willing to do things that, are sufficiently different that it makes us uncomfortable? If I'm the candidate that's making you comfortable, we are miscommunicating. I am not here to be your younger brother to make you feel good about how you look on the field. I'm the guy who's here to tell you that we need to do things really differently.
All right. So how are they going to be different?
We're going to post up a campaign that is both bold in terms of its messaging, and at the same time backed up by credible solutions. So, we're going to be the campaign that doesn't back down from saying we want to end the Fed. But we are going to be the one campaign that knows how to do that. We're not going to back down from saying end the wars, get out of NATO. But we are going to be the one campaign that brings to bear how to go about that. How many steps it's going to take, how many years it's going to take, the kind of messaging and communication it's going to take. How we need to position the United States as a nation that is not isolationist. We are not the Obama administration. We're not retrenching because we're afraid of assuming a leadership role in the world. We just no longer think it's in America's interest to have a militaristically interventionist posture. It's not in our interest. It's not in the interest of the rest of the world, and it does not accurately reflect the ethics of the American people. That is not what you have heard from candidates in the past.
So let's see.
What would you haven't heard that from candidates in the past?
What's that?
I mean, go ahead, Josh.
No, I was just going to say, you can't argue you haven't heard that from the other candidates in the past couple of cycles.
No.
That's right. You haven't. Now, we can put up a candidate who says, I read a book about the Fed. It's full of conspiracy, and I'm unhappy about it, and we need to end the Fed.
Okay. Well, what are your steps to undo the Fed, Mike?
Well, with the Fed, you got to you got to separate the Fed in your mind, at least, if not literally, into its two basic components. One is a regulatory function, of course, and one is a monetary policy function. And you have to take away monetary policy from the Fed and replace it with, I would argue, you have to replace it with a constant growth rate in money stock, and just replace it, in essence, with a computer, right? That's the Milton Friedman approach. There are those who would rather be on a gold standard. I don't think it works in terms of avoiding the deflation that we want to avoid as much as the inflation that we want to avoid. So I would take it one step up from a gold standard in terms of sophistication. And I would...
So that's a digital currency you're talking about?
No. Well, look, the U.S. dollar is a digital currency.
Yes,
I think
in essence, it is. Yeah,
of course it is. I think what you mean is replace the dollar with something else. No, that's an important issue. It's a somewhat unrelated issue.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to wait 30 years, that's one thing, right? Look, one of the reasons we need to end the Fed is because we need to get the Fed out of the business of competing against other currencies to preserve its own ass, right? We can't have it. And I do believe that a digital currency other than the US dollar will eventually give the Fed issued money a sufficient run that it'll create incentive to either literally end the Fed or at least take away the discretionary power in terms of setting monetary policy. But either way, we got to make sure that the Fed no longer is competing to save itself. So the first thing you do is you take away monetary policy, you get rid of the open market committee. And you can do that by just having the Treasury Department decide what the money stock should be in terms of its growth from year to year, set a constant growth rate. It almost doesn't matter what it is. I would suggest 2 or 3% to avoid a great deal of inflation or deflation. Let the price mechanism actually work for a change so that people can interpret why is it that the value of the dollar is going up or down without having Fed policy muddy those waters. And continue to have the Federal Reserve Bank of New York conduct transactions to hit that goal of what the monetary stock ought to be. And then the second thing you want to do is end the Fed's role in terms of regulating banks, because that's where all these bailouts come from. And they're very bad, not just for monetary policy, of course, but for the banking system more generally. You've got to get the Fed out of the regulatory sphere and let the individual Federal Reserve banks around the United States regulate as they see fit and allow them to compete for the commercial banks that they regulate. In other words, you have every commercial bank that wants to be a member of its Federal Reserve Bank, and you wouldn't require it. But if they choose to be regulated by their Federal Reserve Bank, they could choose that. Or they could choose not to be regulated at all. Or they could choose to be regulated by the Treasury Department or by their state banking commission. That would give them, if my math is right, I think I'm up to 14 choices, 15 if you include not being regulated at all. Most banks would choose to be regulated by somebody because banks like to have a seal of approval. But if you had robust competition among regulators, you would eventually get to a system that makes better sense than the system that we have in place today.
So essentially, it's not exactly ending the Fed; it's just ending the Fed's like connection to the government and allowing them just to be.
I would get rid of the Federal
private.
Reserve. It depends on what you mean by the Fed. The Federal Reserve as a system, I would get rid of. The Federal Reserve
But you say you
system,
still have other Federal Reserve banks that you're saying there would still be
the Federal Reserve banks. You don't have to call them Federal Reserve banks.
Yeah. But they're just the big banks that you mean, like those types of whatever they act as. They'll be a different thing. They won't be Fed banks anymore. That's
they
what you're
won't
talking
be
about.
Fed banks anymore. Remember, they're not part of the federal government now.
Yeah, I know. Technically, they are. Yeah.
Technically, they are not part of the federal government now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
If the commercial banks wanted to dissolve them, that's fine. If they wanted to keep them going for the, like I say, the good housekeeping seal of approval that they provide, fine. If they need a contractor as a go-between between the Treasury Department and themselves, because there are certain services that some of the Federal Reserve banks provide that the commercial banks actually find useful, that's fine too. But if you had competition for regulatory oversight among those, you'd eventually have several of them go away. And I wouldn't be presumptuous enough to guess which ones would go away. But I'm guessing that probably all but approximately 2 would completely disappear over time. We just have far too many of them now. So I'd get rid of the Fed board, the Fed as a system, and allow the regional Fed banks to rebrand, rename themselves, recharter themselves, compete with each other, and go out of business. Like I say, I would expect at least a couple to stay in business, and I'd get rid of the rest of the system.
Okay.
Now, let me ask this. In that whole regulatory kind of thing, because there is going to be different organizations and groups and businesses that are going to look for some kind of seal of approval, like you said, good housekeeping, if you will. Would you be open to having different private competitors join that competition spread?
Absolutely. I mean, I would consider the Federal Reserve banks, private competitors, but they do operate today pursuant to being part of the Federal Reserve System, and that obviously operates pursuant to a charter issued by the Congress. But yes, absolutely, or no regulatory authority whatsoever. A bank should be able to give up its bank charter if it wants to. A bank should be able to operate without FDIC insurance if it wants to. A bank should be able to operate without a legal connection to the Treasury Department if it wants to. Now, I'm guessing that would be difficult to pull off in terms of branding, but as a legal matter, there should be no obligation. That means that over time, as a matter of branding, it would be surmountable. I think that would take a whole bunch of years, but I think eventually you could get to the point where a bunch of banks can get together, create its own insurance program if it didn't like the FDIC. By the way, the FDIC itself needs to be spun off from the rest of the federal government. The only reason it's tethered now is that it enjoys the full faith and credit of the Treasury Department, so that it can raise money lickety split if it needs to, and it seems to make a lot of people feel good. But it's a whole bunch of silliness that it's run, by someone who's appointed by the President of the United States. That's just, a step of silliness that doesn't have to be there. It needs to be spun off as well. So yeah, eventually banks would take that over themselves.
All right. You guys got anything else on the, got something, Mitch?
No, I was actually going to transition away from banking a little bit here too. And
I'm sorry, that was just one peculiar example.
No,
please keep going. Free banking is music to my ears.
No, you got tons of knowledge on this, but yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask because I saw this question pop up in the chat a little bit ago here too, and I thought this would be a good one. Ideally, let's say somehow you defy the odds and beat out Biden, and we're assuming Trump or DeSantis. What would the first 100 days of a Mike Termott presidency look like?
It would look like getting rid of the presidential decrees that are in place per se. In other words, I'm not a fan of the President of the United States assuming whatever authority he is able to glom onto himself, right? It has become fashionable now, not only in the first 100 days, but in the first 100 minutes of the Biden administration, in their example, to decree as many things as they think they can get away with, even if they don't think it's necessarily constitutional, and just hope the courts don't reverse it. Right, that's the thing to do. Ever since W started that hard, and it's grown every 4 years since then. I would just automatically reverse all of that bullshit, because we can't live that way. The other thing that I would do is absolutely walk slow on the appointment of heads of cabinet positions, right? These are very dangerous individuals because they fulfill a mission that is largely in their head. We cannot get rid of, notwithstanding what the former governor of Texas confusedly tried to convince everyone of, that he would just get rid of the Department of Education on the first day. And then he forgot, I think, the second agency he wanted to get rid of, and then said he wanted to get rid of the Department of Energy on the third day.
That was Rick Perry, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, ironically, he became one of those cabinet secretaries, as a bold lesson to him that you cannot just get rid of it because you want to. Look, as much as I would love to get rid of those cabinet agencies, and we do need to work at that over time, it does not bode well for constitutionalism for the President of the United States to say, I don't really care how the law works. I'm just going to get rid of them because that's my mood and I think it's a good idea and I'm a libertarian. No, that's not how it works. You don't get to have an argument that says you don't get to violate the Constitution. I do. No, just because you're a libertarian doesn't give you the authority to violate the law, right? But what we can do is walk very slowly in terms of appointing those cabinet heads. And when we eventually do, we put good, strong libertarians in there that won't try to expand the authority of the agencies and pare those agencies all the way back to their bare legal requirements. And then, of course, we go to bat for paring back the regulatory environment that each one of those cabinet agencies imposes on us. The other thing, of course, we have to do is completely reposition foreign policy. One of us alluded to that earlier. We cannot any longer be in the position of either propping up European partners or trying to intimidate people that we perceive to be on the other side of a NATO wall as a matter of policy, and then invading places that just piss us off because either we perceive it's time to intimidate neighbors in the Middle East or Southeast Asia, or it's time for us to impose our method of economics to make sure that oil keeps flowing. Those are not viable long-term foreign policy positions, and we need to start communicating to the rest of the world that we are neither interventionist nor isolationist. We need to be leaders in an ethical sense.
Well, how does that
Alright.
look?
That means that we partner with our allies to develop economies. We're very pro free trade. We have to be pro immigration and pro immigrant. We need to stand up for democracy around the world and not at the point of a gun, right? We need to talk it up. And the reason that we fail at this is because we undermine our own message by occasionally invading someone, which is approximately as undemocratic as you can get. The irony can be lost on no one in the Middle East of how you can be pro self-rule as long as it's rule that the United States government approves of. That's a non sequitur in billion-dollar fashion. And of course, we need to completely reconfigure our Defense Department. Not only should we not be spending 5, 4, or even 3% of GDP, but what we spend it on is insane. We're about to have our asses handed to us in the next generation because of the vulnerability in our online presence. We need to start doing a much better job of cooperating between the Defense Department and corporate security heads, because that is where the name of the game is going to be over the next 20 years.
All right. Well, I want to kind of transition away from the foreign policy for a minute and kind of get into some internal policy, maybe a little bit, but you kind of saw this when you were running for Congress a couple months ago, especially on Spike's show. But one of the big factors in your campaign is that you have law enforcement background. Is that correct, Mr. Maat?
Yes.
Okay.
I was a police officer for 11 years.
All right. So there is a lot of debate within the LP, amongst certain sections on, the questionability of, hey, should we be running a former cop as an LP candidate? This is somebody who worked as an arm of the state at one point. Why should we support you as a libertarian? So,
Because
I know this is, go ahead.
If we were campaigning as a party to try to figure out how to dissolve the state, that would be a completely different debate. And I have respect for people who believe that we should live in a stateless society. Fortunately or unfortunately, that is not the discussion of relevance in this country in which we live, right? The discussion of relevance is, how do we reform our criminal justice system? And I believe that there is no one with more credibility on this issue than I have, not only with my background, but with what I have been talking. Go ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, but it's not about the credibility here. It's about the implied liability of that, because right now you have this sense that, let's say Mike Termont does make it gets the presidential nomination, is that you're going to have people from the left and the Democrat side attacking you for being a former cop. You're going to have people on the right attacking you as a libertarian, that, oh, look at him. He's a cop who doesn't actually really care about cops. And then you're going to have libertarians attacking you, half the libertarians attacking you as well, because, oh, you're a former cop. So really more my question is, how are you planning to handle that kind of attack, those kinds of campaigns and whatnot when that situation's brought up?
You have to tell the truth. People will listen to the truth if you tell them boldly and without compromise. I can compromise with you or with someone else if we're developing a policy, but I'm not going to compromise in terms of telling you the truth. So this is the truth. The truth is that police officers are very popular around the United States. Polling data shows that. Anecdotal data show that. My own personal experience shows that. The other thing that's very true is that this is an industry that needs serious fundamental reform. It's in the interest of the officers themselves. It's in the interest of the United States as a society. And it's in the interest, of course, of the minority of Americans who find themselves wrapped up in the criminal justice system. And this has any number of parts. There's a decriminalization element that we all agree on when it comes to substances. Yes, we have a huge addiction problem in the United States, and I believe that it is not being treated correctly by maintaining the criminalization of drugs, right? It's a health problem. It needs to be addressed as such. And that's only half the reason why we need to push hard in terms of decriminalization. The other is just a matter of ethics. The government has no business in terms of telling you what you can or cannot do with your body. But it's not just about decriminalization. It's also about how we handle what it is that we agree should be criminalized in the United States. Our sentencing is ridiculous. Our prisons are ridiculous. The way we handle prisoners is ridiculous. Perhaps most importantly to me personally is that the way we manage police officers is ridiculous. The unions are far too powerful, and that's not the fault of the unions. They're doing what it is that they believe that they should be doing. It's not the fault of police officers, because who doesn't want a strong union? It's the fault of weak local political leadership. We've got a local leadership problem because police are so popular, right? Political leaders kowtow to police departments. In a lot of towns, police officer in the town where I worked, the police department was by far the most important political institution. In the last election, we just decided who was going to become mayor, and then we made it happen. That's not right, right? Now, the way you get around that is by finding ways to get the industry to move toward personal liability insurance rather than special laws to protect officers. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, in sort of an American ethical sense, people need their right to be protected, their right to seek redress in court when they feel that they've been wronged by an officer or a procedure or a department or by the law. We can't have this case where it's not just qualified immunity. But in a bigger sense than that, we can't have this situation where so much deference is accorded officers that you are blocked at every turn when you seek redress, whether it's in court or administratively at the department level itself. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to get information out of a police department. It's not easy. Even if you are involved in a particular case, it's very difficult to get information. It's very difficult to find out what happened in cases of discipline. Departments are not very good at handing down discipline because the unions do such a strong job of protecting officers. And it undermines the entire industry in terms of behavior that you would want out of a healthy industry. So I'm a big proponent of the idea of liability insurance being put in place because it's the one way to get around union contracts. Insurance companies are not going to put up with the BS that unions put in place. Remember that qualified immunity and the deference by courts accorded to officers don't really serve to protect officers as much as they serve to protect officers' employers. Officers aren't the ones that are going to get hammered by lost lawsuits. It's their employers. And their employers and the unions believe that they're doing themselves a big favor by holding everyone at arm's length. And we need to put an end to that. We need much stronger political leadership.
Now, who are the employers for these police officers, Mike?
By and large, they're cities, they're counties, in some cases, they're states, but they're tightly wound around union contracts, of course. So,
okay.
Yeah,
Now,
it's a tough nut to crack, but crack it we must in the interest of the development of a healthier society going forward.
now let me ask you a question on that regard. Is we're looking to crack the nut there, so to speak. You would the idea of privatizing the police force or allowing for privatized police forces to come into the market be an idea to help crack that nut? Or because a lot of the conversation that comes up with the whole libertarian cop kind of thing is that, okay, well, the cops enforce laws that are against nonviolent, non basically victimless crimes, for lack of better words. They enforce a lot of victimless crimes, a lot
Yep.
of unconstitutional, laws that are on the books. So would
Which is
you,
a legal problem, right? It's not just a police management problem. It's also a state law problem.
I'd agree, but would you would you say that the privatization idea would be a solution to that issue, or something along that lines? Because, like you said, you're looking to crack the nut, and a lot the employer is the one trying to protect itself, the state, the cities, the towns, the municipalities. So by putting that on a private entity, would that alleviate those issues?
I don't think so. I don't have a problem with police officers being employed by a private sector entity. I just am skeptical that it would change very much, and here's why. If you were employed by a private sector entity, that organization, Bob's PD Management Inc., right?
Pinkertons.
Is still going to have to operate pursuant to a contract with somebody. Now, that doesn't have to be a municipal organization. It doesn't have to be a state or a city or a county. It could be a bunch of people who get together, right? Which I think is what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That group of people is by definition a government organization. I just want that to sink in for a minute. Just because you don't call it a city doesn't mean 5,000 people gathered together who have to come up with a way of running this police department isn't a government organization. Maybe with a lowercase g, right? Mm-hmm. But whoever are the 5,000 families who get together to hire Bob's PD Management Inc. are going to have to figure out a way to manage this thing. And I believe you're right back in the soup to a certain extent, because you're going to have representational leadership, and they're going to have to liaison to the PD. The PD is still going to have the constitutional right to band together if they want to form a union. No one is talking about getting rid of our constitutional right of association. So what I like is a version of that, or an idea that includes that, which is that every city needs to do a much better job of availing itself of every opportunity to replace the leadership of the PD that it has now. In other words, the city, I'd rather not name names, but the city that I used to work for, okay, it always has the option, and always knew that it had the option, of switching to leadership from the county. It just didn't do a very good job of holding that over our heads. Every once in a while, they would trot it out and say, you do what we want, or else we're going to get rid of this and fold it into the sheriff's office, and that's going to be a lot better. To your point, I think it would make sense. It would help to have a third option of Bob's PD Management Inc. out there, or any other entity run by a government organization or not. In that sense, school choice is sort of in this bucket. It's the competition that helps make things work. Anything that can get around the union contract that precludes people from being able to have a real effect and give and take on their police department would be a good thing. So yeah, it's a good option. But given that most municipalities have an option now that they don't do a very good job of using, I'm skeptical that just having another option would be a silver bullet, although I do like the idea as a matter of principle.
Okay. Anything from you guys, real quick, before I close out this topic with one final question on this?
No, hit him with it, man.
All right. So, Mike, just plainly put, because it question straight from the chat. Plainly put, how is being a cop an asset for your campaign? How do you plan to answer the accusations that you were personally on the wrong side of the war on drugs and the school to prison pipeline?
I understand how the system works. I understand what's wrong with it, and I understand how to fix it. I'm a big believer in public service. I am not embarrassed to say that I dedicated 11 years of my life to the people in Broward County trying to make their lives better. The fact that I had to make compromises myself, frankly, like anyone else in public service, right? The question you haven't asked me is, how do I feel about working for George Herbert Walker Bush while being an economist in the White House? Yeah, I got a problem with the criminalization of drugs. But I got to tell you, when he said no new taxes and then did it anyway, it was hard to get out of the men's room that day. So my point being that if you choose a life of public policy, if you choose a life of public service, you are guaranteed to come across a whole lot of stuff that you don't like. And however you felt about it on the way in, you're going to dislike more of it on the way out. And that doesn't mean that being a police officer was just continuously a horrific experience for me, because it wasn't. Day in and day out, I had opportunities to play a positive role in the lives of people about whom I cared. I don't mean that, you let yourself get terribly involved with every single family you come across, but it is true. It sounds corny to say it, and a lot of people are afraid to say it for that reason, but it is true that public service changes you in a good and fundamental and profound way, and I recommend it for anyone. Having said that, yeah, I appreciate the fact that we're all pissed off about the criminal justice system, right? But what's the alternative? Asking people to change it who don't know what they're talking about? Asking people to change it who haven't participated in it? I got a problem with that too. I don't have a problem with every Democrat expressing an opinion on this, but they are out of touch when they say the solution is to defund. Not only is it politically unpopular, but it doesn't address the real problem. If you had a shitty police department that was only half the size, you'd still have a problem, right? That's not the issue. Saying we want to defund someone is just a way of saying, I don't really understand it. It seems really complicated, so I want less of it, so the problem goes away. No, I'm sorry. That's just waving a white flag. And being on the Republican side and just saying, I'm pro law enforcement, that's not addressing an issue. That's not getting on the right side of history. That's not doing something about a problem. People in the United States love their police officers and police departments. That doesn't mean they're all idiots, right? That doesn't mean the American population is stupid. We know we have problems, and they have to be addressed. And they have to be addressed in a way that may be complicated, may be hard, maybe requires some sophistication, maybe requires a great deal of time and thoughtfulness. Maybe it requires bringing together a whole lot of people with a lot of different points of view and getting on the same page. I'm not suggesting any of this is easy, but saying the way we're going to get there is to cut out everyone who spent a decade participating in the system and understands it, just not sure that gets you to the 50-yard line.
All right. So, want to go into the lightning round. So, this is something that Tim did for Dennis Misigoy, and I kind of liked it because it's going to kind of move into what you're looking at over the next two-ish years, but these are the top issues for American voters in the 2022 U.S. midterm elections. Now, this was a poll run by Long Island University, so we can take that with as much credibility as we want, guys and girls, but these are what they found to be the 10 most important factors. So I'm just going to say them out. Mike, I want you to give a quick statement on what your feelings, thoughts, plans for that issue. So issue number one, the economy.
It's the economy, stupid. It's the one thing that affects everybody in the United States every day in a big way. I believe it will be the number one issue for a long, long time. And I think it's up to us to make people understand that the reason we get recessions so frequently and so deep is because we have too much government intervention, not too little.
All right. Item number two, as wild as this is to believe, still coronavirus. Go.
It's no one's business whether you get a vaccine or not. When I go to Washington and represent you, I am not going to be any smarter than I am now, which should be slightly scary on some level. I have taken a grand total of one biology course and I wasn't very good at it. If you're relying on me to tell you whether or not to get a vaccine, you are pursuing a crappy strategy. The only thing worse than me telling you whether or not you should get vaccinated is listening to Anthony Fauci tell you, because he knows approximately as much about economics as I do about biology. Everything that you need to know about the White House's attitude toward this issue came out when Fauci said he was disappointed that the court thought it had the authority to decide what the limits were on his authority. That goes in the same basket as the Biden administration not seeking congressional legislative backup for its mandate policies. They knew they weren't going to get it. They knew the courts weren't going to back them up, and they did it anyway. They don't care about the Constitution. They care about their own power.
Sidebar real quick yes or no answer. If you were elected president, would you remove Anthony Fauci?
I wouldn't have to, because he would quit before I got there.
Heard. All right. So
let's
item
put it
number
this
three.
way. I'm bigger and stronger than Anthony Fauci, and I'm a certified defensive tactics instructor. He should see me coming and step aside.
All right. We're going to forcibly remove him in a way, if you will.
Toe first. I get the wiggly end. You get the top half.
Deal. All right. So item number three, and this is kind of a funny, probably going to be a repeat of number two, but healthcare is the third topic that voters are most concerned with this coming midterm.
They should be concerned about it because it continues to become ridiculously expensive. What youngsters won't remember, whether you're libertarian or not, is that this entire industry got completely perverted because of government interventionism. When the government decided to make employer-based health care insurance policies tax deductible, it invited the insurance industry into this area, which of course drove a wedge between the pricing mechanism and the people making the decisions. And then it was off to the races. This is precisely why everything is so ridiculously expensive. If we don't change something soon in terms of the role of insurance, and by that I mean Medicare, Medicaid, as well as private sector insurance, if we don't make some changes quick, this is going to become a bigger ball of wax than climate change. And I think we have approximately as many years as the left-wing scientists say that we have to get ahead of climate change. The reason for that is because prices are going to continue to get out of control until the political momentum for the government to take it over completely will be unstoppable. I believe that we need to step in order to get Medicare and Medicaid pared back. If there's one rule the government should be allowed to make, and I don't believe in government rules. But I do believe we need one rule to stand athwart the train of socialistic history. And that is, the one rule should be that healthcare providers need to post their prices, and they need to keep one price for everybody. Whether you have insurance or not, whether you're Medicaid or Medicare, whether you're the federal government, your Bob's Chop Shop, or Aetna. We need a way to get the pricing mechanism back into healthcare and to work.
All right. So hold that thought on climate change real quick. So the next item up there is national security. So national security is number 4 on people's concern list.
We talked about that a little bit already. We need to completely pare back our attitude toward military intervention as well as our Defense Department budget. Those are two different things that are highly related. We need not to be an isolationist country. We need to be pro-immigration, pro-immigrant, pro-trade, pro-democracy, and pro-Europe standing on its own 2 feet.
All right. So next one is climate change. So we'll come back to that a little bit.
Yes, the climate will change. It will change back and forth. I know only barely more about the climate biology and carbon chemistry than I do about vaccines, right? You don't want politicians making decisions based on bad information. And that's what we have now, right? We have a religious cult in this country leading politicians along in terms of climate change. The good news, somewhat ironically, is that the government is actually behind the private sector. The private sector is out ahead of the government in terms of imposing change. That's the way it should be, and that's the way we should allow it to continue. Carbon-based fuels are expensive. They're expensive for all kinds of reasons, and that's why private sector industry is leading the charge on cutting it back.
All right. So next item on the list is immigration.
We are a nation defined by our history of immigration, and I believe for our own good, we must continue to be defined by a robust pro-immigration policy. Not only is it who we are by virtue of how we have gotten to where we are today, but I believe it is part and parcel of a healthy United States going forward. There is no good reason to believe that the appropriate population of the United States is 300 million, not 400 million, or 400 million, not 500 million. That is a complete fallacy. What I think people need to understand is the truth about this issue, which is that immigrants take up less public resources than people who are born in the United States. They contribute on a net positive basis to the financial soundness and safety of the federal government, even relative to others who are born in the United States. This is mostly because they don't take up public dollars for the education of their kids because they typically have a different demographic than people who are already born here. But for whatever reason, we need to get beyond this notion that it's a drag on the economy to bring people in. If we really believe in the American way of life, and we do, we should be increasing and improving our methods to increase immigration to the United States. I think it is a complete embarrassment that you can achieve your asylum status in Europe in a matter of weeks, and it takes that many years in the United States. It's because we can't make up our minds politically because we've got weak leadership.
All right. So next one is racial/gender equality. So Mike, I know you're not a biologist, but can you tell us what a woman is?
Yes, I can. And if I were bad at this, I wouldn't be able to go downstairs because Nancy is listening. I know damn well what a woman is. And more importantly, so does everybody else. Those out there who pretend that they can't answer that question are being completely silly. This idea of we can't define it undermines women's rights. It undermines men's rights. It undermines our roles in the world. Look, the truth of the matter is that as libertarians, we are happy for everybody to pursue whatever lifestyle you want. Indeed, it's integral to the way that we see the world. You don't have to pursue a life defined the way our society defines being a woman to be a woman. You can define your world whatever way you want. And I believe, indeed, you should define your world, your sexuality, and how you present yourself to the world in any way that you want. I don't believe that that requires a redefinition of male or female. It may require a redefinition of how we present to the world. And I do believe that there are many, many people in the United States and around the world who have felt in generations past and are sick of it, who have felt an unnatural constricture, right? By the way our society defines the way a woman should behave, the way our society defines the way a man should behave. I view that as just as much bullshit as this notion that we don't know what a man or a woman is. I'm a big proponent of you living your life the way that you see fit.
All right. So last three. So number 3 on the final 3, Supreme Court. What are you going to do with that?
We need to continue to appoint justices who see the world plainly and simply, who believe in the Constitution and who believe in the roles of the various branches of government. In other words, we need justices who say, the law just doesn't support your petition. You're going to have to get the legislature to back you up. Bye-bye. Rather than justices who say, the world really would be a lot better off if it worked this way. And so I'm going to impose that ethical construct that's in my head on my interpretation of the Constitution.
All right.
I'm a big Clarence Thomas fan.
All right. I like it. All right. So education. Now, this has been a big one, especially recently, that's been popping up. So what's your take on education?
Well, the big issue I believe that is going to persist is school choice. It's been around for a long time. I think it's going to be around for a long time. At the moment, right, this hour, parental rights are being defined as a big, robust issue more broadly than just through the prism of school choice. I think that that's going to fizzle a little bit, but I do appreciate why it's a hot topic right now. Look, I appreciate that we have a lot of fans of Governor DeSantis because he was, willing to stand up to the federal government. I don't like the federal government getting itself involved in local school management either. But that doesn't mean I want the state to do it either. We can't have a situation where the governor and the president are having an argument that goes something like this. You don't get to violate the Constitution. That's my job, right? I don't want either one of them getting involved in the local management of schools. That's parents' realm. I get to decide how my kids' education is going to play out. And if I screw it up, that's on me. That's what really matters. This isn't so much about this particular book and that particular book. And we can have that debate, right? I'm happy to go there with you if that's where you want to go. But the truth of the matter is, I think more fundamentally, is that I might make a mistake in terms of picking out the literature that my kids should be exposed to. But that's on me. That's my job, right? My job is to get together with other parents and express our opinions to the school board, to elect school board officials at the local level who represent the way that we see the world, the way we want our kids educated, to represent our interests. If we screw it up, we screw it up. I don't want someone outside the county making that decision for me.
All right, getting on to the last one there. Final one, concern for the American voters in the 2022 midterms, foreign policy.
Did we just talk about foreign policy?
National defense is what they talked about. But yeah, foreign policy is very much in line with that national defense thing.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. What's the second half of foreign policy you want to talk about?
That was it. It was foreign policy, which I kind of feel like that's what we're saying.
We already hit that pretty. Yeah, it goes hand in hand with national.
I think we did hit it hard. Let me add one thing. That's an important point. I think that gets lost on a lot of folks who correctly don't pay that much attention to this, right? I mean, if you spend your day worried about foreign policy all day long and your job is not in policy, that's too bad, right? You should have the freedom not to worry about this all day long if you're a normal citizen. But this is an important point. American foreign policy is undermined all the time by our defense policy. We portray ourselves in a very, very bad light through our military interventionism, and it undermines our message of self-rule, of democracy, of libertarianism. Remember, and it's hard to remember when you're on the inside, the United States is the leading beacon of hope of libertarianism around the world. When you think about that, it's scary shit. The rest of the world is more messed up than we are, and we're pissed. In other words, we need to be pissed, not just on our own behalf, but on behalf of everybody else. And Josh, let's remember, we're not in this for you and me. I love you, brother, but I'm not nearly as worried about you or about me as I am with a heck of a lot of other people inside of and outside of the United States who don't have the ability to withstand the interventionism of their government and who don't understand how to seek redress, who have governments that wouldn't allow it if they did know how. This is why we pick up the fight, not to make your life better or mine.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate your time tonight. Want to go around the plugs, let everybody kind of go around, do your thing. Mitch, anything you want to plug tonight real quick?
Nothing much. Just go check out 1776swag.com and go follow me on Twitter at MitchConnorJayla.
Duke, any plugs?
I ain't got no plugs. Mike, thanks for coming on. Thanks for being a good sport. Thanks for laying out a lot of your vision. Appreciate it. And you have a good night and good weekend, man.
Thank you.
Mike, go ahead. Final plugs. Shoot.
I would just invite everybody to go to MikeTremont.com, not because you're going to become wise and wealthy and colors are going to be brighter and food is going to taste better, but because you might get a different view than what you normally would, and you'll find out how to communicate with me directly. And that way, the next time you think I said something profoundly stupid, you'll be able to tell me directly.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Mike. Appreciate your time tonight, Mike, and take care. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again next week.